morning was grey and cold, the sort that made the world tired and lackluster. A harsh wind pushed at the broken windows of Miller's Diner, where the aroma of burned coffee and toasted bread hung heavy in the air. It was still. Too still. In the corner booth by the window, where nobody ever sat unless they had nowhere else to sit, an old woman appeared, just as she did every day. Her name was Eleanor Hayes. She always came alone, always dressed in the same long black coat, and always pinned a silver feather-shaped brooch close to her heart. Her eyes held a profound sadness, the kind that only comes from losing everything you ever loved. Behind the counter, keeping an eye on her like she did every day, was Mara Weaver, a wee waitress with a wearious smile and a hope-filled heart. Most of the other waitresses were like Mara, only they didn't seem to care as much about why they were there. Mara worked for more than money, though. Mara worked for meaning, for validation, that goodness still existed in a world that wasn't always so cold. Mara's own life had not been without hardship. She'd lost her parents at a young age, struggled from one foster home to the next, and by 26, she lived alone in a small apartment, eking out small tips and long shifts. But in spite of it all, her own heart never turned hard. When she caught sight of Eleanor, sitting patiently with shaking hands and aching eyes, Mara felt something within her stir, a tender ache that said, "This woman needs compassion more than coffee." Before we go on, if you think kindness still has a place, if you think little things can be big, please take a minute to like this video, subscribe to Real Kindness Stories, and share it with someone who could use a little hope today. Your help keeps us going so we can keep sharing stories that heal hearts and remind us all that goodness still wins. It was 2 months ago when Mara had first seen Eleanor. Each morning, she had ordered merely a cup of tea and a piece of dry toast. She would tenderly count her coins out of an ancient purse, her fragile hands shaking as if the burden of the years weighed too heavily to bear. Most people turned a deaf ear to her. Some commiserated with her, but nobody ever addressed her. Mara couldn't quite put her finger on why she was so invested, but something in Eleanor's silent sadness resonated with her own quiet nights. The ones where she wept softly into her pillow, wondering if things would ever improve. So Mara began to do small favors. She'd bring Eleanor's toast hot instead of cold. She'd refill her tea for free. Sometimes, she'd even snaffle an extra muffin onto her plate and label it a chef's special. Eleanor initially attempted to decline, blushing, but Mara would merely smile and state, "It's on the house." They both knew that it wasn't, yet neither of them spoke up. Day after day, their quiet camaraderie strengthened. Mara discovered Eleanor enjoyed reading by the light of a lamp, that she had once lived close to the sea, and that she used to smile a lot. Eleanor discovered in turn that Mara worked double shifts because no one else could count on her, that she walked home each night because her car had ceased working months ago, and that through all of this, Mara still held dear the virtue of kindness. But Eleanor never spoke about her past, never mentioned family, friends, or what she'd lost. It was as if she had quietly erased the story of her own life. And then there was one bitter morning when Mara saw something unusual. Eleanor was sitting in her booth, her eyes puffy and red, her hands wrapped around her cup, simply to keep them from shaking. When Mara had asked her softly what was the matter, Eleanor's voice shook as she admitted the truth. She had nowhere to go. She'd been kicked out of her apartment and would sleep that night in a musty old bus station. Mara's heart shattered. She didn't hesitate. She reached out across the table and took Eleanor's trembling hand in hers. She had no money, didn't even have a car. But in that moment, she knew for certain. She couldn't let this woman vanish into the chill. That night, after she closed up the diner, Mara made a choice that would alter both their lives. She did not drive Eleanor to a bus station. She brought her home. It was little, a tiny apartment with chipped paint and used furniture, but it was warm and safe. Mara pushed aside a space, gave Eleanor her own bed, and took the couch for herself. For the remainder of the week, she gave away her food, cleaned Eleanor's clothes, and assisted her in seeking out local relief programs. Each evening, Eleanor's eyes welled up with tears, unable to comprehend why this young lady, a stranger, was doing so much for her. When she finally inquired as to why, Mara's response was very simple, yet very potent. "Because nobody assisted me when I needed it," she whispered. "But I survived because I knew someone would." One day, a week went by, and Eleanor didn't appear at the diner. Mara wrote it off at first. Perhaps she wasn't feeling well. When a second day went by with no sight of her, fear crept in. On the third day, she came running home from work, her heart racing. Eleanor's belongings were nowhere to be found. The bed was made up, and on the pillow was a small folded piece of paper. It said, "Thank you for restoring hope to me." Eleanor, no return address, no message, nothing more. Mara stood stock still, reading the words through tears. She had no idea why it was hurting her so. Eleanor had disappeared from her life as suddenly as she'd appeared. Panic dug its claws into her breast. What if something had gone wrong? She called hospitals, shelters, anywhere she could think of, but there was no sign of Eleanor Hayes. Weeks went by, then months, until One lazy Tuesday morning, all changed. It was still in the diner, the sort of morning where time itself lags. Mara was clearing tables when a procession of black, sleek SUVs pulled up out front. 4 men in suits emerged, their strides purposeful and neat. The diner hushed. Customers exchanged nervous stares. Then 2 attorneys walked in, surveying the place as if looking for someone. Who are they searching for? One of the cooks whispered. Trouble, another muttered. Then one of the lawyers came forward and asked, Is Mara Weaver here? Mara stopped. All heads at the diner turned towards her. Yes, she said warily. That's me. The lawyer smiled politely. Miss Weaver, we've been told to take you with us. Her heart started racing. Why? What is this about? You'll know in a minute, he said calmly. Please come along. Fear and confusion knotted in her chest. But something deep within her, this weird pull of destiny, insisted she go after them. In minutes, she was moving in one of the black SUVs, looking out the window while the landscape shifted from drab streets to vast mansions and secured gates. When she arrived, she emerged before a huge estate lined with trees and hush. It was like entering another world. There was soft piano music inside, sweeping through refined halls. The attorneys led her to a bright room with a view of a garden blanketed with snow. And there, sitting demurely in a pale lavender dress, sat Eleanor Hayes. Mara gasped. Eleanor? Eleanor smiled softly. Hello, dear. For a second, Mara was frozen. Relief, shock, confusion, all emotions crashed simultaneously. Then Eleanor spoke, and the truth came untangled like a dream. She wasn't a poor widow. She wasn't homeless. Eleanor Hayes was the heiress to Hayes International, one of the largest private investment companies in the nation. A woman of great wealth and power who had left it all behind. 2 years before that, she'd lost her husband and sole son in a devastating accident. The pain had drained her, rendering her incapable of confronting the world she used to dominate. So she vanished, leaving behind her wealth, her business, everything, simply to find out if goodness still existed in a world that had taken so much from her. And then she'd met Mara, a young woman who demanded nothing, who gave without ever seeking to receive, who provided warmth, nourishment, and mercy, not to a wealthy woman in disguise, but to a heart she felt was shattered and forgotten. Eleanor grasped Mara's hands across the table, her eyes filled with tears. I don't want a maid or a nurse, she whispered. I want a heart I can trust. I want you with me, Mara, not as an employee, but as family. If you're willing to accept, everything I have will be yours someday, not because of blood, but because of love. You reminded me why life is still worth living. Tears flowed freely down Mara's face. For the first time in her life, she understood what kindness can really do, how a single gesture of compassion can connect 2 lonely hearts and alter destinies for good. They hugged, 2 hearts that had met each other in the big loneliness of the world, proof that no human is ever alone. If this story has touched your heart, kindly take a second to like this video, subscribe to Real Kindness Stories, and share it with someone who shares the belief of kindness. Before we say goodbye, I have one question. What is the most powerful act of kindness anyone can offer? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every single one of them because sometimes all it takes is one act of love to make a stranger into family and let the world know that love never really fades away.